It's hard to imagine how different Star Trek DS9 would be with Laren instead of Major Kira. It's hard to imagine Star Trek Deep Space Nine without Major Kira Neri's nanovisitor, but the original plan for Star Trek Deep Space Nine featured Star Trek The Next Generation's Ensign Laren Michelle Forbes as the station's Bajoran first officer. Because Forbes turned down the role as a series regular in the new Star Trek show, Star Trek writers needed to create a brand new character to be first officer to Commander Benjamin Sisko Avery Brooks. The result was Kira Nerys, a major in the Bajoran militia who also served as the station's liaison to Bajor. In the first few episodes of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, it's clear that Major Kira's role was originally supposed to go to Ensign Ro. Kira's longer hairstyle in Deep Space Nine's premiere episode, Emissary, seems to be modeled after Ro's. Kira being so antagonistic and cynical towards Starfleet, and Sisko in particular, makes a lot more sense when you consider she was supposed to be Ro all along. Kira changed over the course of DS9, and it's likely Ro would have undergone a similar evolution, but I have to wonder what that original show would have been like. Star Trek DS9 would have been very different with Laren instead of Major Kira. In an alternate timeline, Star Trek Deep Space Nine's first officer was Laren instead of Major Kira Nerys. With two leads in Starfleet, this version of DS9 focuses on its Starfleet characters, making it a lot more like other Star Trek shows. The Bajoran militia doesn't have a command-level presence on the station, which makes Bajor's provisional government regard Starfleet with suspicion. Ro tries to bridge the gap as Starfleet's Bajoran liaison, but keeps getting caught between loyalty to her own people and the fact that she ran away to Starfleet instead of fighting for the Resistance. In this alternate Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Laren's character arc reconciles her Starfleet career with her Bajoran roots. Intriguingly, Ro finds purpose in Starfleet espionage and peace in the Bajoran faith. Like in Star Trek The Next Generation, Ro is tempted by the Maquis, but helps take down Michael Eddington Kenneth Mitchell as Sisko's woman on the inside instead of joining them. During DS9's Dominion War, Section 31 recruits Lieutenant Ro instead of Dr. Julian Bashir Alexander Siddig. Ro's shaky faith is renewed simply by being closer to Bajor and the Prophets. Major Kira was a much better character for Star Trek Deep Space Nine than Laren, because DS9's writers created Kira Nerys to fit the story they wanted to tell about Sisko's mission to bring Bajor into the Federation. Ro revealed in Star Trek The Next Generation that her childhood in the Bajoran diaspora made her ashamed of being Bajoran, but Kira never left Bajor, and Nerys was proud of fighting in the Bajoran resistance. Kira's strong faith in her people and clear motive to protect Bajor made her an advocate for Bajor's independence, and a great foil for Sisko. It's one of the great what-ifs in Star Trek history. What if Laren had joined Deep Space Nine instead of Major Kira Nerys? Originally, DS9's first officer was envisioned to be Ro, the tough-as-nails Bajoran Starfleet officer introduced in The Next Generation. But when Michelle Forbes turned down the opportunity to become a regular cast member, producers created a brand new character, Kira Nerys, played by Nanovisitor. The result was nothing short of iconic. Still, the idea lingers like a ripple in the Bajoran wormhole. How different would Deep Space Nine have been with Ro in the mix? The short answer? Very. Laren and Kira Nerys may share Bajoran heritage and defiant temperaments, but they are fundamentally different characters shaped by wildly different experiences and moral compasses. Replacing Kira with Ro would have changed the show's tone, character dynamics, and perhaps even its legacy. Laren, a rebel at odds with Starfleet. Introduced in Star Trek The Next Generation, Laren was a complex character from the start. A Bajoran orphan raised by humans after the Cardassian occupation of Bajor, she never quite fit in anywhere. Her time in Starfleet was defined by friction with authority and personal guilt over a disastrous mission on Garan II, which resulted in her court-martial. Although she eventually earned Captain Picard's trust, Ro was never fully comfortable in the Federation's system of order and diplomacy. That discomfort defined her arc. Ro was deeply principled but also prone to disobedience. In her final TNG appearance, she joined the Maquis, abandoning Starfleet in an act that felt simultaneously traitorous and courageous. Ro was a person who never lost sight of injustice. even when the institution she worked for turned a blind eye. This core tension made Ro fascinating, but also volatile. Had she been the one stationed on Deep Space Nine, the show would likely have revolved more around her internal conflict than the political and spiritual growth that defined Kira's journey. Major Kira, the voice of Bajor, Kira Nerys, by contrast, was not a Starfleet officer at all. She was a Bajoran freedom fighter, labeled a terrorist by many, who had spent most of her life battling the Cardassians. As the first officer of DS9, Kira was not just a military figure. She was a spiritual, cultural, and political representative of her people. This gave the show an essential grounding in the Bajoran perspective. Where Ro was alienated from her roots, Kira was rooted deeply in her nation's wounds and hopes. Kira's role forced her into a constant balancing act between her resistance past and her present political responsibilities. That conflict gave the series some of its most poignant moments, from her uneasy alliances with former Cardassians to her struggle to embrace the Prophet's influence in her life. Kira's Bajoran identity wasn't just part of her backstory, it was the story. Without Kira, DS9 would have had a much looser connection to Bajor and its post-occupation politics. A shift in thematic weight. Laren aboard DS9 would have shifted the show's thematic focus. Instead of being deeply entrenched in Bajor's recovery, religion, and fragile politics, the narrative might have leaned harder into Starfleet's moral ambiguity and the ethics of rebellion. Ro's past with the Maquis alone could have redefined several arcs, potentially making her a more sympathetic figure during the Dominion War or in conflicts involving Section 31. While DS9 was already the most morally gray of the Trek series, Ro's presence could have intensified that tone from the very beginning. Kira's evolution was about healing, bridging divides, and finding faith. Ro, on the other hand, might have continued to challenge institutions and resist authority, even while trying to make peace with her choices. This isn't better or worse, but it is different. It would have made the show's emotional palette sharper, more cynical, and perhaps less introspective. Relationships would have changed radically. One of the most compelling parts of Kira's journey was her relationships. Her loyalty to Sisko, her growing trust in Odo, her spiritual counsel with Kai Opaka, and later with Vedic Beryl and Kai Wynn, all of these relationships deepened Kira's arc and helped illuminate DS9's cultural complexity. Ro would have clashed with many of these same characters in very different ways. Her Starfleet training and Maquis background would likely have put her at odds with Bajor's religious establishment. Unlike Kira, Ro was not spiritual. Her disconnection from Bajoran tradition could have added tension to stories centered around the prophets and the emissary. It's hard to imagine her accepting Sisko's role as emissary with anything but skepticism. Her dynamic with Odo might have been more professional than emotional, given Ro's wariness of authority. And where Kira's late-series relationship with Odo was a slow-burning emotional payoff, Ro might have remained more emotionally guarded, maintaining more adversarial relationships than personal connections. Kira's influence on the ensemble. Kira didn't just anchor the Bajoran storyline, she helped stabilize the ensemble. Her openness,